Hello and welcome. I'm Raghav. Let us say suppose we get a requirement to create a virtual machine with a specific configuration. Let us say we are asked to create a virtual machine running a Linux CentOS operating system, and it should have 1 GB of physical memory space, it should have 2 processors, and should have Apache web server installed, and it should also forward the port number 80 of the virtual machine to port 8080 of the host machine, and there should also be a folder shared between the host machine and the virtual machine. So if we get this requirement and we have to use Vagrant to create and set up this virtual machine, how exactly are we going to do? So that's exactly what we are going to learn today, and this is going to be very easy and very interesting, and I will start from scratch. So if you are a complete beginner, you can follow along with me with hands-on. So we will learn how to add the configurations of the virtual machine in the Vagrant file. Then we will see how we will add the operating system, hardware and software configurations for the machine. We will also learn how we will validate the Vagrant file, if it is a valid Vagrant file or not, and then how to create and set up the virtual machine. So let's get started, and step number one is we will create a Vagrant file. So before that, let me create a new Vagrant environment, and for that I will have to create a new folder. I am going to my projects folder. You can go anywhere and create a new folder. We have already created this folder earlier in our earlier session, but now I'm going to create a new folder. I will say Vagrant VM demo. You can give any name, and now I'll go inside this folder and I will create a Vagrant file here. Now in Vagrant, whenever we create a Vagrant file in a folder, that can be considered as a separate Vagrant environment. So here, this folder earlier that we had created, which had a Vagrant file, can be considered one Vagrant environment. This can be a different Vagrant environment. So now here I will create a Vagrant file. Now you can manually create a file, name it Vagrant file, and then add the configurations, or we can use Vagrant command. I am going to terminal. If you are on Windows, you can go to your command line or PowerShell or Git Bash, and here on the terminal I will say I will first cd to the location of this folder. Let me clear all this, and I will say cd desktop. I am pressing tab on my keyboard to autocomplete these names, projects and Vagrant VM demo. I am here, and now I can say Vagrant init. Now if I say Vagrant init, it will generate our default Vagrant file, and then I will have to add the details about my operating system, box name and other configuration. The other way is I can initialize a Vagrant file along with the box that I want to use or the operating system I want to use, and for that I can go to Vagrant box search, which will take me to this vagrantup.com, discover Vagrant boxes, and here I can search for the operating system I want or the box I want. So I will search for CentOS, and here is what I want: CentOS 7 virtual machine, and it is available from VirtualBox, libvirt, Hyper-V, VMware. So here you can see this is what I need to add in my Vagrant file, or I can directly start a Vagrant file using this Vagrant init CentOS 7. Okay. So for now, let me just start with a simple Vagrant file. I will say Vagrant init, and you can see it has created a Vagrant file here. Now I will open the Vagrant file and add the configurations. So you can open it with any text editor like Notepad, Notepad++, Sublime Text, or we can also use some other better editors like VS Code or Sublime Text will also work. So this is a very simple editor, but let me open it in let us say VS Code. You can use any editor. It's just for easy understanding, and it will be very easy to see, and you will be able to see all the changes here. So this is my Vagrant file. Now you can see a lot of comments are here. This is a Ruby syntax. Let me just remove all these comments so that it is easier for us to see all the details here. Okay, so you can see this is my Vagrant file as of now, which has just these two lines as of now, and now I will add the other details. So here now I will add all the configurations. So this is what I want, and I will tell you step by step what all this means, although we have used a Vagrant file earlier. But now let us see everything in detail. So the Vagrant file uses Ruby syntax, and whenever you want to format your Vagrant file, you can use some online Ruby formatters just to make sure that it is a valid Ruby syntax. So you can just go online and say Ruby formatter, and you will get a lot of online Ruby formatters like this. Then the first line that you see in a Vagrant file, that is vagrant.configure to do config. This loads the Vagrant API version 2 and assigns it to a variable named config, and that is why we can now use the variable config for the rest of this file. So you can see config.vm.box, config.vm.provider. So now we can use this variable called config. So this is common for all the Vagrant files. After this, we will give the configuration of our virtual machine box. So here we want to use CentOS 7. So this is what I will give here. I can also just copy it from here. This is what I need. I will also keep all the details and data of the Vagrant file in the notes section. So if you want, you can copy it from there. So this is what I will use, config.vm.box CentOS 7. After this, we need to provide the details about the provider of the virtual machine. So in my case, I am using VirtualBox, and I can give the memory, which is 1 GB, that is 1024 MB, and the CPUs I want to use. So all this I can give here, and then I can give this this is the hardware configuration, this is the provider, this is the hardware configurations of the machine, the memory, the processors, etc. Then we can give the network configurations using config.vm.network. Here we can set up private and public networks. Private network will enable the virtual machine to talk to the host and other virtual machines within that environment, and the public IP will enable the virtual machine to be accessible from outside, out of the host machine as well. And then we have port forwarding. This will be useful if there is any application running on the virtual machine on a specific port. If I want to make it accessible from the host from a specific port, I can give it here. So this particular line means the port 80 of the virtual machine is mapped to port 8080 of the host machine, and we will see this in a moment when we install Apache web server on port 80 on the virtual machine. It should be accessible from the host machine using port 8080. Then we can give the information about the shared folder, the folder that will be shared between the host machine and the virtual machine. We have already seen this in the session of shared folder, that the folder of the Vagrant file, that is the folder where you have your Vagrant file on your host machine, is by default shared with a folder called Vagrant of the virtual machine. So that is by default shared, but in case you want to share a different folder, you can use this configuration config.vm.synced folder. And then the provisioning script, this will help us to install, update software, run any setup scripts, etc. So you can have the provision scripts added within the Vagrant file, or we can also put them in a separate file and add the location here. So this also we have seen in detail in the provision section, the session where we learned provisioning of a virtual machine. So this is how the Vagrant file will look like, and this is exactly what I'm going to add here. I have added these details separately here, so I'll just copy this and add it here. So you can see this is the provider, config.vm.provider, that is VirtualBox. This is the memory and CPU. So here I have kept the memory as 512 MB so that it does not consume more space from my host machine. Otherwise, if you want 1 GB, you can say 1024 here. CPUs also I'm going to comment for now. I'm pressing control / or command / to comment out. So I will let it decide on how much CPUs it want. and then again the synced folder, as I told you that the folder of the Vagrant file is by default synced, so I don't want to sync a different folder. So this is also I am commenting out for now. This is the provisioning script, and if I show you the provisioning script, I'll show you that in a moment. I want to use this provisioning script where I will have the steps or commands to set up the Apache web server. This is one of our requirements to set up Apache web server on the virtual machine. Then I'm doing the port forwarding here, and then I'm also using that in case this port is not available, then we should have autocorrect, and we can use any port within this range 8000 to 9000. Okay, so this is my Vagrant file. I will save this, and before I run Vagrant up, I will say Vagrant validate. This will check my Vagrant file is a valid Vagrant file, all the syntax and everything is correct. And here it says there are some errors in the configuration. It says that the provision script, that is provision1.sh, does not exist, and this is because I have given the direct name here. That means it is expecting the provision1.sh script to be available in the same folder where this Vagrant file is. Otherwise, I should give the complete location here. So I'm going to copy this provision script from my earlier project folder. I'm going to copy it from here. This also we have seen earlier how to do provisioning. So this is my provisioning script, and if I show you this, here you can see after setting up and starting the virtual machine, it will run all these commands. This is a CentOS system, so it will use yum update yum install. If it is some different distribution of Linux, you can use apt-get as well here instead of yum. So it is installing the server, starting it, and doing all these updates. So it will have the Apache server running here. Okay. Also, now if I again run the command, I'm pressing the up arrow on my keyboard to go to the last command. I will say Vagrant validate, and let us see, and yes, now it is a valid Vagrant file. So we have done all these steps. So now we have also ran Vagrant validate, and just in case you want to do a formatting or want to check the formatting, you can copy this and go to any online Ruby formatter and format, and it will show you if there are any errors. It will show you, so that this means this looks like everything is fine here. So you can see everything is fine here. So this is a valid Ruby format. So now I will just say Vagrant up, and after that I will check if the Apache server is up and running. So I will go back here. I will say Vagrant up. This will get the virtual machine, start the virtual machine, run the provision scripts, and make the virtual machine ready for us. And this process can take some time based on the image size of the virtual machine and the network speed and the provisioning scripts we are running. Based on all that, this process can take some time. So you can see it is booting the system, booting the machine. This can take some time. I will keep all the notes, everything, and the details of the Vagrant file, the data of the Vagrant file in the notes or the description section. So just in case you want, you can copy it from there as well. So you can see now it is running the provisioning script. So it is running the provisioners here. So the machine is ready, and it is running the provisioning script. That is, it is running all the commands we have in our provision file, where we have commands to install and start the web server. So looks some issue here, but that's fine. It is trying a different mirror to get these details. So let's wait for this. Okay, so it is running now, and it is taking some time. So that's fine. In case it takes some time, let us wait for this to get completed. Okay, so it is now getting all these, running all these transactions. Okay, so this should be up very soon. Okay, now it is verifying all these and it is now completed. So it has installed some packages. Now, during this process, in case you face any issues, any errors, so you can troubleshoot, you can copy the error message, check online, and this is how you will learn. When I was doing it for the first time, I got so many errors and issues. Sometimes there was some very, silly mistakes, like the format of my Vagrant file was not correct. I missed something here and there. So these things will happen with you if you are a complete beginner. So don't worry on that. Just see, look at the error message. A lot of times you will find out what is the issue by just looking at the message. We already know that we can use the command vagrant validate to check if our vagrant file is all fine and up to date and does not have any problems. So all that you can check, and in case this process takes some time for you, that is fine. It depends on the network speed, the size of the virtual machine, space available on our system, everything. In my case also it has taken some time. I will edit out some of the time I was waiting, so you don't have to see all that, but otherwise it's fine if it takes some time. In case you get any errors, you can always troubleshoot. So this is done. If I now check Vagrant status, I should be able to see the status of my virtual machine and it is running. So that is fine, it is running. Now if I have to go inside the virtual machine, I will say, let me clear the screen. I will say Vagrant SSH. It will go inside my running virtual machine, and here I can run. This is now I am in my virtual machine, which is my Linux CentOS system. I can now run any of the commands here, and as I told you, in our Vagrant virtual machine, the folder, our Vagrant file folder, that is the folder where we have our Vagrant file on our host system, is by default shared with a folder called Vagrant on the virtual machine. So let us see that. If I say cd and go to a folder called Vagrant, I am saying VAG and pressing tab on my keyboard, and if I say ls to see the content of this folder, you can see the content of our folder, that is Vagrant file and provision.sh, both are here. I can also say ls-l to see a list view. So you can see these two files are already here. In case I add any other file here and then reload, if I come out and reload by saying Vagrant reload and restart the machine, I will see the other files also here on my system. Now if it has done our provisioning script, that is where we installed and set up the Apache web server, the Apache web server should be running, and for that I can go to my host system, because we have already forwarded port 80 of our virtual machine to port 8080 of our host system. So if I go on my host system and say http :// localhost, I can also use the IP of my system in place of localhost and say 8080. Here I am getting hello world. That means our Apache server is running, and this is running on our virtual machine, and I am able to access it on my host machine. I can also check on my virtual machine. If I go here, I am inside my virtual machine. If I say curl localhost, and you can see it is running hello world here as well. Or if I say telnet localhost port 80, so if I use sudo telnet localhost port 80, telnet is not found, so I will have to install it. I will say sudo yum install telnet, and then I should be able to use it. Now if I say telnet localhost 80, so you can see connected to localhost, that means our port 80 is running here on this machine. I will press Ctrl C to come out, and I will say exit to come out of the virtual machine. And also if you have a GUI for your virtual machine provider, in my case it is VirtualBox, so if I go to the GUI of my VirtualBox, I should be able to see this virtual machine. So you can see this is running. It has 512 MB of memory as we have configured, and all the details I can see here. Okay, so this is running here, and we are able to configure and set up our virtual machine as per the requirement. Now if I want to stop the virtual machine, I can say vagrant halt, and if I want to destroy it completely and remove it from my system, I can say vagrant destroy. So let me do that, and if I say vagrant reload, it will first run vagrant halt and then vagrant up, that is restart the machine, but I want to first stop it. I will say vagrant halt, and it will stop here as well, and it will gracefully shut down the virtual machine, and it has powered off here as well. And then I will say vagrant destroy if I don't want to keep it on my system. It will ask me for a confirmation. I will say yes, and then it will remove the virtual machine completely. You can see it has removed it from here as well, and everything is removed from my system. Okay, so if you want, you can take a screenshot of this screen, keep it handy with you, and look at it several times, so you will always remember how we set up and do configurations for software and hardware in Vagrantfile for our virtual machine. Okay, now there are different configuration options in Vagrant, or we also call them as namespaces in Vagrant. Config.vm is the most common, and that is what we have used. If you see here, what we have used mostly is config.vm. So this is to give the configuration of the virtual machine. Then we have config.ssh as well. Here we can manage the SSH, how your machine will be accessed over SSH. We have config.winrm. Here we define for Windows remote management system. Then we also have config win SSH. This is for SSH on Windows, and then config.vagrant to modify the behavior of Vagrant itself. So if you just say search for config.vm, it will take you to the official documentation of Vagrant. Here you can see the machine settings that we can do with config.vm and all the options you can see here. Then we also have config.sh, config.winrm, config.winssh, config.vagrant. So you can see all this if you want to see some advanced setup that we can do for our virtual machine configuration. And if you face any issues, you can let me know. I hope this was very useful. I will see you soon. Thank you for watching, and never stop learning.